Friday, the final day of the week. These are the voyages of the program Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Its ongoing mission: to explore strange new movies, to seek out new bits and new edifications, to boldly go where no radio program has gone before. Elkant's Movie Club. It's Elkant's Movie Club. Elkant's Movie Club. It's Elkant's Movie Club.
And with that, we welcome in our friend Kent Welcome out of the Lincoln Journal-Star. Happy Friday, Kent.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
You really enjoyed that Raiders game last week, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Kent and I were commiserating on Twitter because both
really?
our teams were playing poorly at the same time.
Terribly.
And I had both games on, so it was like, oh, God. The only thing that was good about that Broncos game was it reminded me of the 80s with those uniforms. They looked great.
Yep.
Looked absolutely fantastic. And, of course, the Raiders don't have throwback uniforms. Those are their
There's no
uniforms.
uniforms, right? Yeah.
Because they never went forward. And it's still, I saw yesterday all the logos of all the old AFL teams.
Mm-hmm.
And a Raiders logo in 1964 is basically the exact same thing today.
Yep. They don't play. That's fine with me. I grew up a Penn State fan, as John knows, and you know what? But just keep what you got. It's fine.
Yeah, no,
It
works.
yeah.
It works for you.
Do they still use the same uniforms from
Penn State? Yeah, it's exactly the same. I believe they did one alternate uniform about 15 years ago where they like changed the blue lining, and that was it. Like nothing else. It's just white and black, essentially a little bit of blue.
I mean, the only time they get fancy is they put the numbers occasionally on the side of the helmet.
Numbers, yeah. For
And
that.
I kind of hate that. That's
Anniversaries.
boring. Just do something.
Why change it? Why mess around? I love the way USC looks. I love the way Penn State looks. They're completely different. One's flashy, the other one's not. They're both awesome.
No, it works for me.
Both awesome.
It works
Fine
for
with
me.
Yeah.
Well, this week's movie is A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original version from 1984. So, yes, we're going back 40 years from this one. This is a Wes Craven classic. And, yes, it is part of the what do we call it?
Mount Rushmore of horror.
I think you could definitely say that. And so I made a point of this to watch it last Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but it's a great Friday movie.
It is.
Right? I mean, it's a great movie on a Friday night if there's nothing else going on. And it took, as soon as I had not seen it in its entirety since probably high school. Hadn't watched it again. And it immediately took me back into that time frame.
Yeah, I watched it in 2010. I was telling this to John before. When they did the remake, of it, I watched the remake. We saw it in the theater, and I went back and I watched the original just to see how close it was. And the guy who was in the remake playing Freddy Krueger tried out for Freddy Krueger in the original movie and obviously didn't get it. But then when they remade it, he got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Robert Englund was not supposed to be the original Freddy Krueger, as I recall. Is that right, Kent?
Well, they auditioned a whole bunch of guys, and what happened along the way was Craven changed his mind. He wanted a great big guy, yada, 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 and then decided, no, I want an actor that can really make this guy this sort of creepy, but have some acting chops. And so then Englund was then cast after that. So
who's the best of the big three?
Even been considered.
Who's the best of the big three? Jason, Michael, or Freddy?
I think Freddy.
You think Freddy? Okay.
Yeah.
I do too, because he's got the most personality.
He's also the most believable.
Yep.
He's also arguably the scariest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can sleep with the other guys around. You're scared of them, but you can sleep.
They're not going to come into your dreams. Right. Yeah. I think for me, though, it probably is Michael Myers, because Michael Myers at that age when I saw it was terrifying. Just absolutely. I don't know what it was about him, but he was. And, that movie didn't have any blood in it, nothing until the end.
No.
And at the end, and then all of a sudden he's gone from when he fell through the French doors. I'm like, that for some reason scared me more than Freddy did. But yeah,
it was interesting too. And I knew the basic plot, but I had forgotten, just how everything was laid out. How you get right into it. I mean, the first thing you see in this film is the first girl's nightmare, and Freddy shows up right away. Now, you don't know who he is or his backstory or anything, but he shows up right away. And sometimes that kind of runs counter to, we talked about this when we did Jaws a few weeks ago, how, just the minimalist nature of the whole thing made it even scarier.
Yeah.
But for this, I thought it seemed to work because you've got to establish the story that these are happening in nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And so for it to open with the nightmare, I thought worked well in this.
Yeah, and it's also that sort of letting you know what's going on without letting you know everything that's going on is a technique that Craven used in Last House on the Left, which came like mid-70s, early 70s, and The Hills Have Eyes. Those were his two big movies before Nightmare on Elm Street, and both of them have a little bit of that, right? Kind of shows you and then takes it back. And so that, because he wrote this as well. Wes Craven wrote and directed this. It isn't adapted from anything. So that's was one of his techniques. He died 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer than that. Yeah. So
I'd read that he had heard about something that had happened with dreams, and they had done an investigation on people's nightmares, and he read this, and then that's what made him think about putting the villain inside the person's nightmares because of this report he had read about.
And weirdly enough, the Freddy Krueger was a guy who picked on Wes Craven when he was a kid.
The actual
name.
Yeah. He took the name from a guy who was like a bully, picked on him or whatever when he was in junior high or high school, something like that.
Nice. Yeah,
well, I hope
so that's where the name comes from.
Well, if anything, it probably made the bullies feel even more because, I mean, of all the villains, Freddy Krueger's kind of got a cult following, or at least, he became popular. In this one, not as much of the personality. In the later films, you started to see even more of the personality.
Yeah.
Like in the second one, I still laugh because there's the scene. It's in the second one where the girl's all freaked out and she's up against the TV and, she's imagining, something's going on. And all of a sudden Freddy's head pops out of the TV. His arms pop out of the side. Freddy grabs the girl and says, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," and then smashes her into the TV. And of course, as teenagers, we quoted that all the time because we thought it was funny.
Okay, that's interesting. Just that quote you said, because I've never seen this movie. I was familiar with Freddy in a conceptual level, and I kind of got the gist of his bit. But whenever I would see parodies, it would always be like, bitch. Like he would always punctuate a sentence with bitch.
Yes.
But didn't see that in this movie. And watching this movie, I was just kind of left with, I get why he's scary, but I don't.
Right.
It didn't leave an impact on me. It was just a dude.
The trailer was so scary when this movie came. You remember the trailer, Kent?
Absolutely.
With the giant. That trailer, still today, thinking back on it, was incredibly scary. I don't know if we don't do that well anymore. We still make fancy trailers and everything, but something was so scary about that one. It made you want to go see the movie, but it was frightening.
I don't remember the trailer.
They're in the alley, and he's like going through, and he's got like his
fingers scraping the wall.
Scraping the walls. Yeah, it was. And then the tub scene is in the trailer, and then one of the bed scenes, like you fall through the bed. It was. I still remember it being really scary.
That's because
and I told these guys last week I was terrified by this thing when I saw it in the theater, because the other thing that you don't have now, right, that it's not going to have it can't have that kind of effectiveness, is you really didn't know what it was from the trailer. Didn't really tell you what it really was, right? It gave you a sense of what it might be like, but you went in and it only opened, I think, on 150 screens, and then expanded very slowly. So there wasn't big word of mouth. There was no social media. There weren't 8 million reviews of movies out, right? And it just terrified us, and it's like,
it's scary.
Yay. Yeah. Interestingly, and I didn't remember this until I saw it, and then it was like, well, of course, Ronnie Blakely, who plays the mom, the girl's mom, is, in addition to being an actress, she was got Oscar nominated for being in Nashville, which is
the TV show.
No, the movie, the Robert Altman movie.
Okay.
Long, yeah. And she got an Oscar nominated, then got cast in this, but she's a music person, right? She put out records in the 70s and whatever. And I've met and talked to her multiple times over the years. She's kind of a fixture on the LA sort of roots scene. And I asked her once about this movie, about making it, and she said it was so low budget, right?
It looks it.
They shot it in like less than a month, or her part was less than a month anyway. And she said she thought it was just going to be utter crap while they were shooting it, right? Because it didn't make any sense necessarily until it got put together. And then she's like, yeah, this is by far the thing that I am most known for. I mean, the critics and everybody say, oh, most known for Nashville and all that. And she said, no, she says, I still have people coming up to me, talk to me about Nightmare on Elm Street. I haven't probably seen her for 10 years, but yeah, she's like, yeah, they come up, and once they know it's me, because she doesn't exactly look today like she did then, which neither do I, right? So
none of us do. The budget was only $1.8 million for this movie, and one of the things that they did, of course, probably the most famous, or one of the most famous scenes in the movie, is when Johnny Depp gets it, and gets sucked into the bed, and then it turns into the blood geyser. They actually shot that upside down.
That makes sense.
So all of that blood that's shooting up, when they shot it, actually they were pouring it in, and it was going down.
500 gallons.
Yeah, and they all they did was just flip the film.
Johnny Depp is a lot of blood.
Right.
He does. They
wanted to make sure you thought. Kenny, and this goes back to something that Nick said about trailers and whatever. I honestly believe, and I know that other scary movies have come along after it. The last true movie that I was afraid was the Blair Witch Project. Oh. Not because of what the movie did, but because of all the preview stuff that they had, that they were leaking on the internet. Back then, we still had dial-up. I remember having to dial up, and it had all of this stuff about the found footage. And you really thought, when we went to see that movie, because we saw it the night it opened, we thought it really happened. Not until the last scene. I remember my wife, then fiance, saying to me, oh, this is not real. Up until that point, we really thought these people were suffering. She wanted to leave the theater because we had no background. You couldn't Google it. You couldn't. Yeah. It was really, I think it was the end of real true horror.
We talked about that last week when we did that movie. But no, that's a good point, though.
Kind of bouncing off of that. This movie, and I don't know if it's just because I'm so desensitized to a bunch of other horror that's come out in my lifetime. I liked the concept of this movie, and I understood how it could have been scary, but it wasn't scary to me. I didn't find it scary. I found the concept more scary than the execution.
You're older than any of us were when we saw it the first time.
I'm sure that's something to do with it too.
Yeah, how old were you, Kent, when you saw it first time?
Probably early 20s.
Oh, you're that much. I didn't realize you were that much older than me. Okay. Because I was 14 when I saw it.
Yeah, and I didn't see it in the theater, but I saw it like 2 years later on VHS, so I was like 15, 16.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure, because I watched scary movies when I was also 15.
Yeah.
The Conjuring really got me. I think that came out around the time I was 15.
Yeah, and that's a whole different level of. I think all those movies are a different level.
Paranormal Activity scared the daylight.
They're all a different level of it. Yeah.
That all feels kind of tame compared to this. It's it's gory.
Here's what I don't think you ever had, and maybe you didn't, and you relate to this, Ken, because they made a lot of movies about this. The being at home with either the babysitter or you just at home and having no connection to the outside world because we didn't have. There was a different feel to that. And so they made a bunch of movies based off of you're at home. There's really nobody to help you.
Right.
You can't be safe anywhere.
And you can't be safe. Nowadays, I don't think that works because of all the ability we have to contact and get a hold of people.
Well, and that wouldn't work. And the other reason I think maybe you don't find this as scary is in fact because this thing so influenced all these movies that have come afterward in this sort of genre that have found ways to crank up the scary, so to speak.
I'm just desensitized. I've microdosed horror my entire life.
See, I think one of the reasons why this worked for me was, this is a time where I'm getting up early to go to school. I'm getting up early. I had the paper out back there. It was in the dark. And it's just the notion of, because when you're in bed, you're by yourself and it's a dark room and you're left there with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
That by itself can be a little scary. And then you add to the element of everyone has dreams and everyone has bad dreams and everyone has nightmares. And so I think this, more than the Halloween film, more than Friday the 13th, I thought, at least when I was growing up, related, because it's something that you felt like, okay, even though obviously you knew it was a movie, you knew it wasn't real, it still felt like it was possible.
Sure.
Because
Law and Order is scarier than a zombie movie.
Yeah.
Because the Law and Order can happen to you.
And I can totally understand the concept being, because it is a scary concept.
It's a great concept.
A dream is, in theory, the safest place you can be. Yeah, you can have nightmares, but it's all in your head. So then being able to get killed because you're having a dream in what should be the safest place, that's a terrifying concept. So I understand why it's scary. It's just the movie itself. Like, Freddy Krueger looks kind of effed up. Like, that's...
He does.
Well, he was. I mean, he was
burned. It's a rubber mask.
Well, and it was done cheaply.
Real?
It was done.
Well, nowadays you could do it with computers and stuff and make it probably look pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Now they actually did, when they formed the mask, they actually did do some research and they actually had photographs of burn victims.
Oh, okay. That makes
so
sense.
to at least give them a concept of what it should be. So, at least they tried from that standpoint. I think the other thing that makes this as well, sure, every psycho killer in these films has their weapon of choice.
Their bit.
The gloves with the razor blades or stake is I thought brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's just so different. And then of course you get the scene where the mom reveals, hey, we were the ones that actually did in the real Freddy Krueger, and she kept one of the gloves. And so that added to it. But it's to me it's iconic.
I thought that was a cool thing to add, but them adding that part made it almost feel like a sequel to a movie that didn't exist.
Well, they remade it in 2010. That's the 2020 version where they actually kill him. They show you killing him. Yeah.
And I like that idea, but that kind of that made me want to watch that movie more than this movie, just because that felt more compelling to me.
The couple things that I spotted going through this time that I hadn't remembered or didn't even notice maybe previously, but one of them was when they're standing on the bridge and talking, Johnny Depp and whatever her name is,
Heather Langenkamp.
Heather, there you go. And they've got the hamburgers and whatever, and he talks about Balinese dream manipulation stuff. That in fact exists.
Yeah,
it's Tibetan.
Well,
and it's called dream yoga, and they do all kinds of stuff and control their own dreams. And how Craven knew about that in 1982 or whatever, I don't know, but he
read about. That's what I had read. He read about that like in a National Geographic or something like that, and that's what triggered it for him to make that idea.
Like, I hadn't picked that up. And the other thing that I saw somewhere, this is the 40th anniversary release time on October 1st, as in 6 days ago, 8 days ago, whatever. They released the 40th anniversary edition of this. The Blu-ray comes out on the 15th. There's the actors are all going around having screenings of this in big cities. Like Robert Englund was doing one in, like, I think Detroit tonight.
Oh,
so it's by sheer chance we hit the 40th anniversary celebration. We're almost right on the nose. So, and the third point, that since we're talking about the gloves, they made 2 sets. One had basically dull gloves because he had to wear them, right? When he
right.
And so they had dull ones so wouldn't cut people up and himself and whatever. And then they had one real sharp one because it had to cut through things.
Yeah.
And apparently there were multiple wounds on set.
I bet.
This also, and if you watch the film, you notice at the beginning when, you get the obligatory, produced by or the film studio, that you see an old school logo for New Line Cinema. This is the film that basically made New Line Cinema, which of course still exists today. In fact, they nicknamed New Line Cinema the house that Freddie built. Because this was the first big hit for New Line Cinema, and they've been around ever since.
And props to them for getting this done in 91 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah,
they did.
No
91 minutes. That's pretty good.
And it didn't need to be much longer.
It didn't.
But sometimes they, nowadays they'll add extra stuff in.
Now they pack it out.
Filler.
Would cut it to get to where.
But for this time period, for the 80s, I mean, 2 hours was a long movie back then.
So when you guys first saw this movie, what was the reception about the end of the movie? Because this being the only Elm Street movie I've ever seen, it felt bad. It felt like a bad ending.
Like, we knew there'd be a sequel at that point because the sequel started really getting big. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like 80, 81, 82, a lot of the movies that were made in that time end up having sequels. I think we all thought when we saw it at Lakeside Theater in New Orleans that it was going to have a sequel.
Well, the sequel came out 1 year later.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it was intended in that moment, but even if there wasn't intended to be a sequel, it seems like all of these films have that ending where the bad guy really isn't gone, or at least leaves open the possibility that he's still with us.
I didn't like the way it was executed, I guess.
In
fact, window, you mean? Like coming through, grabbing her?
Like grabbing her through the window, but also they left. Like, was that also a dream?
I thought it was a dream.
Like, was it another Inception?
Yeah, with the girls.
The
girls are singing. I thought that was isn't that a dream?
I think it's a dream, but the reality is that ending was sort of forced into the movie by Robert Shea, who is the founder of New Line, because it basically wanted to set up the sequel. Okay. In the original, Freddy's dead and gone, right? It's over.
See, and I think they could have gotten away with having Freddy disappear and then that being the end of it, and then the sequel comes out, and I think that would make him even scarier.
Cliffhangers were huge in everything from TV shows to movies. For there was a stretch where everything was a cliffhanger.
I don't think it was a good cliffhanger.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like, oh my God, he's still alive.
There are good cliffhangers. I don't think that was a good one.
I'm just reading from an interview that Craven had done about the ending, and it reads, the original ending has Nancy come out the door. It's an unusually cloudy day. Car pulls up with her dead friends in it. She's startled. She goes out and gets in the car wondering what's going on, and they drive into the fog with the mother left standing on the doorstep, and that was it. It was very brief and suggestive that maybe life is sort of like a dream too.
Right.
Shea wanted Freddie to be the one driving the car and have the kids screaming. It all became very negative. So I refused to have Freddie in the driver's seat, and I thought up about 5 different endings, and the one we used with Freddie pulling the mother through the doorway amused us all so much we couldn't not use it.
Wow.
And I like it too because it's another one of the iconic scenes of that movie, and it obviously looks pretty fake because it's like a stiff, but just watching her get pulled through the window. The only thing I didn't like about the scene is the kids are all freaking out because they realize something's wrong, and the top comes down on the car, and the car starts driving away. Who the hell's driving a car?
I think Freddy is the car because the top of the car was the same pattern.
Oh,
as
okay.
Freddy's
Well, then that makes sense.
In him.
All right.
Which is what also led me to believe that they were also within a dream because Freddy's driving the car is like a Christine situation.
The whole time I thought it was because it's also hazy a little bit too.
Yeah. The haze part of it was also, I think.
Have you guys watched American Fiction? Have you watched You've seen American Fiction, right, Kent?
Yeah.
Okay, so I love the end of that movie because I think that's what happens so many times when they're making movies. They're like, what about this? And let's try this up. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's try it up. Yeah. And so I think of it. I think of when I watch it, I'm like, that's probably what happens with 8 out of 10 movies. They're like, what about this ending? No, that's not good. And that's why I thought that was a great ending for that movie because it's real life when they're writing movies.
Yeah. And there have been a few other movies, and the names are not going to come to me right now, where they'll play it and they'll have an alternate ending right on the same movie.
Yeah.
Wayne's World,
Clue.
Wayne's World.
I love Clue. Clue is one of my favorites.
Clue's endings are great.